everybody, welcome back. So today we are taking a look at, well, this might look like a river, but seeing the size of my hand, you can see it's definitely a little, like, stream here cutting into this dirt. And why on earth would we do this? Well, this is actually a really cool, miniature model, still made in nature, but a miniature model of a bigger concept in the natural world, and that is basically we're going to look at what water does.
Now we have a rock right behind us, classic red bed.
This is pretty perfect for seeing it. You'll see that water does about the same thing it does on a large scale. So if you look at this right away, you're already probably seeing that reminds you of a river. You know, if we had a little person here standing on the banks of the river, they'd be smaller than that. Some people hanging out here, they'd be on the river's edge, some trees growing. So it's kind of a good little model for that. But then as I zoom out and you start seeing the bigger picture here, what you'll see is that this goes on. And let's move up here to, again, in a real scaled up version, we'd call this the headwaters, where the water begins to run. And if we could move all the way up here, as you can see, this is actually an old dirt roadway, but the water is coming out from way up there. So it's running down through here. And so again, that might not be the original source, but if the original source is up there, that'd be the headwaters. And as you can see, it's coming down through here, and it's much steeper angle here. So that's where we can see, just like in mountains, in a mountain setting where the water first comes down, it carves these deep canyons, it carves deeper, it's running faster, it has a lot more debris that it carries down, and it runs down through here, and as it comes down, the channel will eventually begin to change. And so if we follow our deep canyon there, I don't know, I'm not sure what that would be in the scale, big pine tree. But if we go down here, see, you're deep within a canyon now, and this is the water. Again, just imagine our little person walking through. They'd be smaller than that, walking through the river in the canyon walls, taller than them, just spewing out into the mouth of the canyon. And as it does that, it will probably also collect maybe some other water sources coming down to here, and the waters come down through, and they're carrying a load of sediment. As the sediment moves along the bottom, when it jumps and skips, we call that saltation. So here's the waters going down through here. We'll have certain points where it kind of, and it falls. That's where we have waterfalls, and any feature of the water like that there it has to drop off. Again, associated more with the canyon country. And then we continue to move down, and what we're seeing is that the canyon is getting, that was a pterodactyl or something large, that butterfly. I don't know if we want to scale the butterfly, that's pretty big. But if you see that the canyon is getting shallower, so now our canyon is not as deep, it's not cutting as deep. The angle is changing. Our water doesn't have to, it's not flowing at as steep of an angle, and it's not as sharp. So it's going to start to drop some of its sediment load as this gets less steep of an angle. And as the energy, we talked about this in another video, the energy of this system starts to slow down, it will start dropping off sediment. And so you'll see more sediment. Now, it's going to get interesting here if we follow again. Let's look at like bird's eye view. Doesn't that look just like a river? Any river that you would see an aerial view of? We're basically flying in a plane now above the river. And check that out. And think about an actual large-scale river and how this compares. Now, one thing that you definitely want to look at are these curves. Now, even in this small setting, the water acts like it does on a big scale, and it curves, it meanders. And you'll see this if you see aerial pictures of rivers, how they meander. And actually, if this becomes disconnected here, this becomes what we call an oxbow lake. And so we might even kind of see that there. This is kind of broken off from the main channel here. And if it gets completely disconnected, it will be an oxbow lake. All right, so let's continue flying our plane on this aerial view of the river. Enjoy the ride as we follow the river on its course and see where it ends up. Now we're getting more extreme curves in the river down here coming up. So there we go. There's some more pterodactyls. The blue butterflies. So there you go. There's an extreme curve there. And this is, as you can see, again, as a model scale, this is really a great demonstration. We see that it pushes hard along this side and deposits sediment on the inside. So we can see the whole cut bank model there. Let's continue flying above this river and see where it's heading up. Something interesting's coming up here, I can see. As we fly, we see that, oh, the water is depositing here. Now, this is a perfect example of a basin. So here we have a basin in the landscape. So we have a place for all of this water to spill into. And let's get that glare out of there. So that is like basically a lake. Think of a lake here. So this is the water coming down and spilling into here and building up in the basin, and that gives us a lake. Now, if this were to be dry, which sometimes happens, sometimes caused by humans, sometimes naturally over time, this doesn't have a water source that feeds into it. We call that a playa. You might see these basins in the desert. You might walk along them when you're rock hounding. That's no longer filling up with water, so it's not a lake anymore. But today we see that this is spilling in, and we have a lake. Let's just see now. If the lake fills up so high that it spills over its banks, it will continue on, and that's where we see where this could flow actually into, say, maybe another basin and become another lake. We see that a lot with Pleistocene Lakes along like regions in southern and middle California where there used to be like Death Valley area. There was this whole system of lakes and rivers that were connected, maybe even connected to the Colorado River at one point in the past. So really interesting. So one more thing that's interesting here is when we think about man-made structures. So we have this and we're thinking about a natural lake, but if we think of this as reservoirs today, so if that were dammed by man, that would kind of be the spillway. Not a perfect model, but still that would be your spillway for excess water. And this would be the reservoir created by man. And this is the river coming into it. Now, what you see here is, see how the water system is offloading a lot of sediment right there? So that's that's an issue with reservoirs. And we see that with, say, Lake Mead, Lake Powell, and some of these reservoirs are building up so much sediment that the water system actually, it increases the speed at which it becomes shallow, which is a problem. The water column doesn't act the same way. The water's warmer. It's prone to, say, algal blooms and issues like that. But yeah, we can see those man-made issues too with all that sediment that's building up. And that's right where the river's dumping in. So that's the river carrying those particles. You can actually see it carrying the particles right there. So check that out. The river is moving along sediment, dumping it into the basin. And at this point in our system, things have really slowed down. And in an actual river system, this would be best represented by the endpoint or a delta. At this point in the system, the river will deposit the finest grained sediments, the silts, and it will basically flow into an ocean in a big river system like a Mississippi or Colorado River or larger rivers around the world. This is where, like I said, a lot of fine-grained sediments are deposited, so that's why around pluvial and deltaic systems, we tend to see those fertile lands. Now, in this case, the water actually is dumping out into this meadow or marshland. Again, in real world, this would be an ocean, but we do have aquatic plants, so it works. And if you think about all of this and you upscale our miniature model here today, you can imagine the different regions and the different types of sediments that were deposited in each of the places, each of the systems we've talked about here. And that tells you what kind of sediment you can expect, and therefore what types of rocks you can expect. From the conglomerates and sandstones around the river and the finer grained sediments in the lakes and the delta, all the way to the coarser material that was back up at our headwaters. So that was just a perfect little model of a hydrological system, rivers, lakes, and we'll talk a lot more about all of these features here at Let's Go Geo. So stay tuned, join me on the next adventure. We'll do some big scale versions of rivers and lakes from past to present, and have a lot more adventures in the field. So I'll see you guys next time on the next adventure.